The small market town of Rothburn, nestled within the emerald hills and misty fields of Northumberland, had always moved at its own quiet pace. It was the sort of place where everyone knew your name, where local stories outlived the people who inspired them, and where the sound of a rally engine once meant the world. Jamie Hayes, now 28, hadn't set foot in the town since he was a teenager. Life had taken him far away, to the fast-moving streets of Manchester, to a forgettable corporate job, and into a self-imposed exile from his past. But now, with his father's recent passing, Jamie found himself standing before a crumbling brick garage. The keys still worked. The creaky garage door groaned open, revealing a scene suspended in time. Sunlight spilled in through broken window panes, illuminating decades of dust that floated like ash. Old toolboxes, stacks of magazines from the 1980s, and grease-stained rags lay exactly where they'd been left years ago. But it was the shape in the center. There it was, partially covered in a moth-eaten tarp. His father's beloved 1983 Ford Escort 2000 rupees. The paint was faded, the tires half deflated, and the rust had crept along the edges like ivy. But the soul of the car remained unmistakable. This was the same vehicle that had made Tom Hayes a legend in the local amateur rally scene. Tom Hayes wasn't just a rally driver. He was a symbol, a larger-than-life figure in a quiet town. People respected him, adored him, even. But all that changed one cold, rainy night during a local rally event when Tom lost control on a tight corner. Though he survived the crash, something inside him broke that day. Jamie never forgave him. As a boy, he couldn't understand why his father suddenly turned cold. Why the garage was locked. Why the car, once the heartbeat of their lives, became a ghost. As the years passed, resentment replaced confusion. Tom refused to talk about the accident, and Jamie refused to ask. Their relationship grew distant, and now, Tom was gone. Jamie stood in the middle of the garage, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes locked on the car that had once meant everything to both of them. A gust of wind rattled the window frame. The place smelled of oil, rust, and memory. He didn't know why he came back. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was curiosity, or maybe, buried deep under the layers of hurt, he wanted to understand who his father really was. Not the man who shut him out, but the one who once taught him to ride a bike, to throw a spanner, and to change a tire. Jamie reached forward, pulling the tarp back slowly. The Escort stared back at him, tired, scarred, but not dead. Something stirred inside Jamie, a feeling he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something else. Maybe this old car held more than rust and broken parts. Maybe it held answers. And for the first time in 10 years, Jamie didn't turn away. As Jamie gently eased open the driver's side door of the battered Escort 2000 rupees, a wave of nostalgia hit him like a punch to the chest. The smell of aged leather, oil, and faint tobacco from his father's old roll-ups lingered in the air, like time itself had refused to move on inside the cockpit. He sat down slowly, his fingers brushing the cracked steering wheel. His eyes scanned the dashboard, dusty but intact. Every switch, every dial, every imperfection was exactly as he remembered it, frozen in time like a memory that never aged. Instinctively, Jamie reached toward the glove box. He hesitated, unsure of what he might find. Old rally maps? A rusted torch? Perhaps nothing at all. With a soft click, the compartment opened, and there it was. A single, sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. To Jamie, when you're ready. Jamie's breath caught in his throat. The script was deliberate, measured. His father's hand, always so precise, so confident. He turned the envelope over and gently broke the seal. Heart pounding louder than any engine ever could. He unfolded the letter, the paper trembling slightly in his fingers as he began to read. Jamie, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. There are 1,000 things I wish I'd said, and 1,000,000 I wish I hadn't. But life doesn't always give you the timing you want. I know I let you down. I know I walked away from more than just a track that day. The truth is, I broke that day. Not from the crash, but from the fear. I looked at you, my boy, just 8 years old, and realized how close I'd come to leaving you without a father. And instead of leaning into you, I shut down. I thought locking the car away would protect you from the part of me I was most afraid of. The part that lives for danger, for noise, for speed. But I realize now, That part of me was never the danger. Silence was. This car. She's not just a machine. She's a story. Our story. You used to sit in that passenger seat and ask me if we could race forever. I didn't have an answer back then. I still don't. But I do know this. If you're sitting in this car again, it means you came back. And maybe, just maybe, you're ready. I couldn't fix everything, Jamie. But if you ever feel ready, take her for one last ride. Find the road, feel the wind, and maybe, just maybe, you'll find me in the roar of the engine. Love, Dad. Jamie sat frozen. The garage, once just a shell of the past, now felt sacred, like a church made of steel and memory. Tears welled in his eyes, silently carving paths down his dust-streaked face. He wasn't the kind of man who cried often. But this letter, it wasn't just words on paper. It was the conversation they never had. It was the hug they never shared. It was the apology he thought he'd never hear. His hands clenched the letter as though afraid it might vanish. Everything changed in that moment. The Escort was no longer a broken relic. It wasn't just about bolts and rust. It was about redemption, about reconnection, about a father reaching out to his son, one final time, through the only language they'd ever truly shared, the car. Jamie knew what he had to do. It wasn't going to be easy. The Escort had been asleep for years. The engine would need work. The wiring, the gearbox, the suspension, all of it. But that didn't matter. This wasn't just a restoration. This was a resurrection. Jamie folded the letter gently, placing it back into the glove box like a sacred artifact. He looked around the garage again, this time not with distance, but with determination. He was going to bring her back to life. Not just for his father. Not just for the town. But for himself. For the first time in years, Jamie felt purpose. Not driven by guilt. Not by grief. But by love. Jamie stood in the center of the garage, the letter still fresh in his memory, the weight of its words settling deep into his chest. The Escort 2000 rupees loomed before him, tired, rusting, and silent. He knew he couldn't do this alone. He reached for his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. Harry Shaw. They had been thick as thieves growing up. From building go-karts with lawnmower engines to sneaking out at night to watch illegal street races. Harry had always been the grease to Jamie's spark. But life had pulled them in different directions. Jamie left for university and London, chasing design contracts and city dreams. Harry had stayed behind, taking over his uncle's garage. When Harry answered the call, his voice was cautious. "Mate, it's been a while." Jamie didn't waste time. He explained the letter, the Escort, the promise. There was a long pause on the other end. "You sure about digging up old ghosts?" Harry asked. Jamie looked around at the dusty walls of his father's garage, at the photos still hanging lopsided on the pegboard, at the racing trophies dulled by time, at the single bulb flickering overhead like a heartbeat. "I've never been more sure of anything," he replied. 2 days later, Harry arrived, toolbox in hand, cap pulled low over his eyes. He gave the Escort a slow walk around, whistling low. "She's rough," he muttered. "Yeah," Jamie replied, "but she's still got a heartbeat." They got started. The first step was disassembly. Everything had to come out. The rusted battery, the moldy carpets, the cracked dashboard, the tired engine block. As they peeled back layers of the car, it felt like they were peeling back the layers of Jamie's grief, too. Each bolt was a memory. There was the gear knob, still worn smooth from his father's fingers. The passenger seat, where Jamie had sat with a massive crash helmet swallowing his tiny head. The back seat, where his dad once comforted him after a scraped knee during a rally camp. Some parts were unsalvageable, others, surprisingly intact, but it wasn't just the Escort they were restoring, it was something deeper. "Remember this?" Harry asked one afternoon, holding up a bent rally plaque. Jamie nodded, eyes stinging. "The Northumberland Sprint, '96. You were there, front row," screamed louder than the exhaust. But it wasn't all nostalgia. There were moments that hit like a punch. One afternoon, Jamie found the dent on the passenger door, the one from the crash. His father had spun out on a rain-slicked corner, colliding with a tree. No serious injuries, but something in Tom Hayes had broken that day. Harry noticed Jamie staring. "He wasn't the same after that," Harry said softly. "Neither was I," Jamie replied. "They worked in silence after that. Not awkward, just heavy. Like grief being processed one wrench turn at a time. Jamie, though not mechanically inclined, was determined to be hands-on. Harry taught him the basics. How to clean pistons, inspect timing belts, and strip paint without damaging the frame. He failed often. Burned his hand on the block once. Dropped a socket wrench on his foot. But he never quit. You were always stubborn, Harry chuckled. I get it from him, Jamie replied. And slowly, over long nights and early mornings, they made progress. The engine was rebuilt. The gearbox reconditioned. The suspension replaced. Every finished task was a small victory, like earning back fragments of Jamie's childhood. One screw at a time. Breakthroughs. One rainy evening, they found a tape cassette jammed in the old radio system. Jamie carefully extracted it and played it in his father's dusty stereo in the corner of the garage. It was his father's rally notes, recorded in his voice. Turns, pace notes, jokes, laughter. Hearing it again nearly brought Jamie to his knees. Left 3, opens over crest. Jamie, if you're listening to this one day, don't lift off, son. Trust it, push through. Harry said nothing, just placed a hand on Jamie's shoulder. It was more than just a note. It was a metaphor. Don't lift off, push through. The Escort reborn. Weeks turned into months. Bit by bit, the Escort came back to life. The bodywork was sanded down, rust-treated, and painted in its original rally white with the same blue racing stripes that once tore through country tracks. The interior was redone, preserving the charm of the original dash but replacing the torn seats with vintage replicas. And finally, the engine roared. The sound wasn't just mechanical. It was emotional. It was spiritual. It was a heartbeat revived. As Jamie worked on the car, he began remembering details he had suppressed. How his dad taught him to double clutch, how they built a soapbox car together, and how he once overheard his father decline a professional rally offer because, "My boy needs me more." The resentment began to melt. Jamie realized his father hadn't chosen rallying over him. He had given it up for him. That changed everything. Finally, after 6 months of rebuilding, the Escort roared back to life. Jamie took it for a test drive through the winding forest roads his father used to race. But halfway through, the engine sputtered. A faulty carburetor brought the car to a halt. Jamie kicked the tire in frustration, but then laughed. You really didn't make it easy, did you, Dad? It was a test, not of mechanical endurance, but of emotional strength. Jamie towed the car back and worked overnight to fix the issue. On a whim, and perhaps out of a sense of destiny, Jamie entered the car into the town's local vintage rally. It was symbolic. He didn't care about winning. He just wanted to drive that car on a track one last time, the way it was meant to be. The night before the race, Jamie visited the garage one final time and placed his father's letter on the dashboard. The day of the race. Rain pelted the dirt track. The Escort's windscreen fogged up quickly, just like the memories clouding Jamie's mind. But when the light turned green, something clicked. Corner after corner, slide after slide, Jamie found a rhythm. He felt his father there, not literally, but in every gear shift, every handbrake turn. By the final lap, he wasn't chasing a position, he was chasing a connection, and he had found it. He finished 5th, but for Jamie, it was a win. The aftermath. After the race, Harry clapped Jamie on the back. He'd be proud of you, mate. Jamie stood by the Escort, hand resting on the roof. It wasn't just a car. It was a vessel of memories, pain, love, and healing. Later, Jamie converted the garage into a community space where kids could learn about mechanics. He named it Hayes Racing Dreams. Not in honor of the man his father was, but the one Jamie now understood. Ending reflection. Sometimes, redemption doesn't come in a thunderclap. It comes in the purr of an old engine, in the smell of petrol and metal, and in the journey you take to forgive the people who loved you the best they could.